There we go. All right, everybody, welcome back in. It is another week of tri-state football, and it is yours truly, Daniel Kuhn, alongside my co-host and statistician. I don't even know what I'm trying to say, but my knowledge extraordinaire, Jacob Berkemeier, back again. Got to recap week 8, I believe. Right?
Yes,
We're on week 3.
always giving the great intros, man.
Yeah, I
Always
try,
giving
man.
great
I try.
intros.
When they asked me to be the host all that time ago, I was like, okay, I guess so. I mean, I'm going to trip over my words probably 10 times out of 10. But here we are, week 8 in the books. It's crazy that we're already nearing the end of the regular season, and playoff football is looming large in the rearview mirror. Objects are closer than they appear. And we had some interesting games this weekend to talk about, question mark.
Yeah.
There were some good games. There were some bad games. Jacob and I were both out covering on Friday night, and I don't think either one of us had a game that we could, write home to our parents about. But nonetheless, we're here. We're going to talk about week 8.
We are. So, I mean, I'll start it off.
Yeah.
So, I was at the Kings Milford game. So, Milford, for those of you who don't know, they're building a new facility, new stadium, whole bunch of new stuff. I was there last year, looked very good. Unfortunately, their team did not look as good. And Greg and I had talked to Tom Grippa before the game, Milford's head coach. They're down, I want to say he said 9 starters with season-ending injuries. So they had some freshmen out there logging heavy minutes. I think a right tackle freshman was out there. So rough game for Milford. Kings ended up beating them 45-0, and really 38 of those points were scored in the first half. So it wasn't close from the start. But if you're Milford, you're getting young guys that are playing a little bit. I mean, it's a rough situation, but you kind of just have to make the most of it with the injury bug that they got this year. Milford had a great season last year, so I think there's still a lot of potential and good for that program coming in the future. But I mean, I'll tell you one thing: Kings has a really solid squad. They've just gotten overshadowed by Anderson, Winton Woods this year in the Eastern Cincinnati Conference. Because both games I've been at for Kings this year, Carson Lindholm's been a maniac. He's ran all over. The first game I was at, I think, was at Loveland, and he had a really good game against Loveland. And this game, he ended up with 4 total touchdowns. He opened the game first play with a 80-yard touchdown run, and then Nate Lyman has been really good throughout the season too. Really started heating up the last few weeks. This game wasn't really needed as much with how quickly the score got out of hand. I mean, it was 21-0 at the end of the first. But Lyman did have a 25-yard touchdown catch, and it was a really nice play where he was able to cut it back about 4 or 5 times, broke 5 or 6 guys' ankles, and scored. So he's committed to Eastern Michigan, and he's a really good player for that team. Grant Nuri had a solid day, 11 for 16 passing, 109 yards and a touchdown. But like I was saying, Carson Lindholm was really the bell cow and kind of the MVP of the night for them. He opened the game up with that 80-yard touchdown, finished 15 attempts, 145 yards for almost an average of 10 yards a carry and 4 touchdowns. And then Nathan Tucker also, to start the third quarter, ripped off a 76-yard touchdown for Kings as well. Nathan is, let me check, he is a sophomore. So something to maybe keep your eye on for Kings in the future is Nathan Tucker. But yeah, Lyman 4 for 48 and 1 touchdown. And yeah, pretty easy win for Kings, but I know if you're Kings, you're feeling pretty good going into these last couple of weeks. They have a pretty favorable schedule down the stretch. Kings plays, well, actually, I take that back. They play Turpin this week, which will be a good matchup for them. And then the following week they play Walnut, which should be a win. However, like I said, I think Kings, their excellence this year has kind of been overshadowed by Winton Woods and Anderson. So, I mean, they're 5-2 in the conference, 6-2 overall. So Kings is going to get a really nice playoff bid as long as they take care of business these last couple of weeks. Their point differential for the year is 120 points. They've outscored their opponents. So playing really good football. They got a good defense. They have playmakers on offense. So I think if you're Kings, you're feeling pretty good and moving into these last couple of weeks of the year. And then, if you're Milford, it's tough when you catch an injury bug like that and you have 8 or 9 starters go down. You at this point, you're almost evaluating and you're hoping for the best seeding wise, and maybe you can get a couple wins to end the year out and see what you can do in the playoffs. But I really hope, for all those guys, they can get healthy, and for the juniors and sophomores who were hurt can get back out on the field next year and make a difference. But
I will say one thing, because me and you had talked on Friday night about the injuries that Milford has suffered this year. And, being in a position for any program is just tough. It's an unfortunate one to have. But at the very least, there's a silver lining. Some of these young guys that maybe, are getting this playing time now or are getting some valuable minutes, playing varsity level football. So maybe once you bring them along a couple of years, they're freshmen especially, bring them along maybe a year or two down the road from now, they're really ready to go. Right, they've already got a little bit of that experience just because of the situation they've been put in, and there's a silver lining to that as well for Milford, if there is any. Right, to be down that many starters for the whole season, and to have to plug and play guys, kids really, who are probably a little young, younger than you would normally.
Weight wise too. I think that's really just the biggest thing is. They might have the talent, but I mean, most freshmen aren't physically ready for varsity
not developed
football
enough yet. Right.
So, but it's something that, it's absolutely something that you can look at as a silver lining with, you get these guys in the weight room for a couple 1 or 2 more off seasons, could be a force next year. So definitely, hopefully Milford, can build on some things going into next year. And then for Kings, it's just about keeping it rolling. But with that being said, I think I'm going to kick it back to you for your game.
Yeah. So Jacob was out at Kings Milford, and King, at the very least, for Jacob's sake, they scored points. There was offense. So it was one-sided, but there was offense. There was a symbol of offense in that game. I covered St. X and LaSalle. And let me tell you, there was no offense to be had. Offense was optional on Friday night at Lancer Stadium between LaSalle and St. X. And like we've preached and I've talked about on here before, the ASC North of Cincinnati high school football, the GCL South, it's common that these games always turn into defensive battles. But the thing for me, and the biggest takeaway I think I had from the game, is I've covered St. X twice now. And granted, the first game was against Centerville, a non-conference, pretty much out of city. Rare. I don't want to say random, a rare opponent. You don't play Centerville every year, right? Mm-hmm. So they don't know you. They don't know the kind of offense you run. They don't have that scouting look they had that LaSalle would. But St. X was throwing the ball all over the field that game. And I was under the impression they have some good talent at wide receiver. Cam Taylor, who I'll talk about here in a minute, he's a great talent. I can't remember the name of the number 88 on St. X, but he's also very good. And then they have Daniel Vollmer, who can play pretty much any position. I bridge this into an interesting development for St. X was on Friday night against LaSalle. They opened the game with Vollmer at quarterback over Chase Herbstreit. And that wasn't like a situation where they're just running a drive or two to see what Vollmer could do running the offense. That was the whole first quarter. They didn't even attempt to put Herbstreit in. I mean, if you've ever been to LaSalle Stadium, it's very close quarters in the sidelines. Like there's nowhere to go, especially if you're me and you're a reporter. So I was stuck on the St. X sideline, just literally walking through the bench back and forth between the two ends of the field to get to where I needed to go. So I had a bird's eye view of everything going on and had my listening ears on. And from what I gathered, they were very much in the boat that they were going to roll with Vollmer at quarterback over Herbstreit. Herbstreit didn't have his helmet on at the start of the game, and it wasn't a situation where he was injured because he came back in later in the game, or he came in later in the game. But at this point in the season for St. X, I know they're going into this game, they're 4-3, but they had three quality losses to three really good opponents. And the measuring stick is Moeller, right? Everyone we're going to measure ourselves off of Moeller. And I think St. X, you were there. I mean, the scoreline maybe didn't speak to, and you can probably speak more to it than I can because you were there, but it's not like X got destroyed, right? I mean, they scored.
No, I mean, it was Moeller had it in hand in the first half, but then X fought back throughout the whole second half and gave themselves a chance to tie the game up in the last 2 minutes. So they definitely were competing that game.
Yeah. So my point is that your record might be 4-3, but there's no saying that this isn't a really good football team. Well-rounded, very good at executing the game, and everybody knows who Chase Herbstreit is because of his dad. So of course there's they benched Herbstreit. But maybe he doesn't have the best arm of all time, but he's been great with his legs this year. I mean, we've talked about that on here previously. I mean, it's an element to his game that had been unlocked. And I'm not sitting here saying that Daniel Vollmer isn't a great athlete. I mean, I freaking saw it firsthand. That dude can play any position they want him to. Heck, they play him on defense sometimes. Right? He's like the Travis Hunter of Cincinnati high school football. I'm kidding, but in actuality, he's a great athlete. And I was just a little surprised. My point of this kind of segue into this, and I've talked about this, is I was a little surprised that they decided to pull that in a GCL South Conference game on the road, 3/4 of the way through your season. Like, it seems, unless there's something underlying that we don't know about, maybe Herbstreit wasn't feeling good or something was bothering him, injury-wise, but to take him out and kind of just completely revamp your offense around Vollmer this late in the season is kind of weird. And it would be one thing if Vollmer and Herbstreit played a similar style of game, but they couldn't be any different. Vollmer's primarily a runner. He can throw the ball, but he's primarily going to use his legs. And like I know I just said, Herbstreit's gotten really good at running, scrambling this year, but primarily he's very much a pocket passer. So to kind of just absolutely just upheave everything you've done all season and kind of throw Vollmer in there, excuse me, I just had a voice crack, and throw Vollmer in there was surprising to me. And anywho, I'm getting at it is Vollmer didn't play very great. He had an interception that wasn't even anywhere near close to his receiver, but had some good runs. They did get down to when I say there was no offense in this game, there wasn't any offense in this game. The first down of the game was with 3 minutes left in the first quarter.
It's impressive.
It took almost 10 minutes to have a first down.
Yeah.
Like, no offense at all. Vollmer got a little drive going together. They ran the ball really well. Jake Britt, their starting running back, he's pretty solid little player. He had a decent little game, and there were a couple times they got him going, and one of those was in the very end of the first quarter. Got it all the way down to, I think, like the 5 or 10 yard line, somewhere in that range, and they threw it and ended up being a yard short. Pass interference was called, so they kicked a field goal, and it was 3-0, and it stayed then it stayed that way the whole game. I mean, they could not get anything going. LaSalle's defense played really well, but so did St. X's. And then eventually they put Herbstreit in, and it took a while. The offense showed more life under Herbstreit, but it still couldn't, finish drives. It couldn't find the end zone. Eventually, they ended up scoring late. Cam Taylor is his name, I believe. Cameron Taylor. He scored the game-winning touchdown. He ended up wide open on a slant across the middle of the field. But I'm just going to point these stats out to everybody. Chase Herbstreit on limited appearances went 4 for 6 for 60 yards. Daniel Vollmer went 7 for 12 for 53. Jake Britt was 12 attempts for 31 yards on the ground. Vollmer had 41 yards on 13 attempts. It was just that kind of game.
Yeah.
I mean, it just was not. And my point is too is both teams were very like almost afraid to throw the football. Like they just kept running the ball, especially. And I'm not taking anything away from anybody, but LaSalle, I mean, Patrick McLaughlin ended up with 25 attempts, but it felt like they just like he ran the ball 24 times.
Yeah.
Like, so it's just like he had as many rushing attempts as he did, almost as many rushing attempts as he did passing attempts.
Yeah.
So that just kind of speaks to the game. Overview, once Herb Street came back in, St. X had that life. So it was just really confusing, like what they were trying to do. Because they took Vollmer out and put Herb Street in at the beginning of the second quarter. They played that way the rest of the way, and then Vollmer was back in to start the second half.
Huh.
It was just
And then they put Chase back in? Or no?
Eventually, yeah. I mean, later in the game they did. It was weird. But
yeah, it definitely is a weird situation to me because I mean, obviously Coach Speck has a much better idea of everything, and I don't mean to like just from an outside perspective though, you feel like Vollmer is best utilized kind of as that gadget player and like being able to move him across like all over the field. And I think you can use him in that Taysom Hill role as your wildcat QB, but I feel like you take a little bit like he's one of your bigger threats on offense, and I feel like if you're taking him out of the receiving game and the running game in that way, when you have a capable quarterback in Herb Street. So I'm just curious how that'll play out. And like I said, I mean, I don't mean to like Coach Speck definitely has a much better idea of all that, but it's just that surprised me a little bit too when you texted me and said Chase wasn't starting. So
yeah. Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off.
No, you're good.
I'm not trying to speak ill will of anybody. Not Vollmer, not McLaughlin, or not Herb Street, and that's definitely not Coach Speck. I think respect him very much. So he obviously probably has a better idea than I do. I just was more or less just surprised. It was and I mean surprising situation.
Like you said, I mean it's week 8 too. So I think this move wouldn't have caught us as much off guard if it was, like week 4 or 5. But just making a switch like that in week 8 definitely is a little just interesting. And I'm wondering too if they're going to kind of keep trying to involve Vollmer and run that 2 QB look that they almost like. I mean, the year they won state with Chase Wolf and
oh gosh, yeah, I remember
Sean Clifford, and they were running 2 QBs like they just go with the hot hand throughout that entire playoff run, and it ended up working for him. So
yeah, and maybe that's what he's trying to do. That's a great point. I didn't even think about that.
Like get both of them going to where like come playoff time, you have 2 options that you can throw back there and just kind of ride the hot hand. And so maybe that's a reasoning for it, but it's interesting and something for everyone to kind of keep an eye on as the
for sure
last couple weeks play out.
It was, I mean, it was surprising considering the point in the season we're at, but that's a great point, Jacob. I didn't even think about, when they used to throw Chase Wolf and Sean Clifford. Those two give me nightmares. So I try not to think about them. But that's a great point. I mean, that could be exactly what they're trying to do. But and I'll leave it at this. So I'll throw it back to you in a second. My only thing is they've run, at least when I was at Centerville, they ran multiple different looks where both Herb Street and Vollmer were in the backfield. So it's like, you know what I mean? That could be a solution. I don't know. But at the end of the day, I wanted to talk about it because it was just interesting. And, the score line, I don't think reflects bad play. One other statistic I wanted to point out, Kobe Clapper for St. is insane.
Had a crazy day.
Yeah, 16 tackles, 2 sacks. I mean, just unbelievable numbers. Yeah. And he flies all over the place. All over the place. But so great night for Kobe Clapper. And St. X comes out with a win. They moved to 2-1.
Yep.
2-1 in conference play. So record maybe not the best St. X season of all time overall, but they've had a pretty good season, even despite the fact. So, all right. Anywho, I'll throw it back to Jacob, and he's going to talk about Winton Woods and West Claremont.
Yeah, so definitely a scare for Winton Woods this week. So throughout this entire show, since we started in, I want to say week 3, we've kind of been talking about how in the Eastern Cincinnati Conference that the two teams that you're just looking like Winton Woods and Anderson have been head and shoulders above, but the West Claremont Wolves gave them a run for their money on on Friday. So Winton Woods snuck out of there with a 12-7 win against West Claremont. Now, Winton Woods' defense has been unbelievable all year and is what pretty much won them this game because Bo Rickman, West Claremont's quarterback, went 0 for 6 for 6 yards. So great job in the passing game for on the defensive side of the ball for Winton Woods. And then they also held West Claremont to 3.3 average yards per rush as a team. So usually if you're doing that, you're going to be in pretty good shape. Bo Rickman, the quarterback, he had 16 attempts for 37. And then their running back had a little bit better day. Landon Young for West Claremont had 11 carries, 64 yards, and a touchdown. But then on the Winton Woods side of the ball, Bryshawn Brown, 14 for 18, 90 yards and a touchdown. So pretty efficient day for him. And then Isaiah Garrett, their running back, had 60 yards on 18 attempts for a touchdown. And then Chris Mathis was the receiver who caught the touchdown. But overall, the receivers didn't really have any gaudy numbers. He spread the rock around pretty well. Got 6 guys involved in the passing game. So that's always good when you're getting everybody involved. And then, it's just a weird game because nobody on Winton Woods got a sack, which if West Claremont's only throwing the ball 6 times, that's going to be hard. Mm-hmm. But as a team, they only had 3 tackles for a loss. So it really just seemed like they weren't necessarily dominating the line of scrimmage, but they were controlling the line of scrimmage very much, where it's even if you're not getting a tackle for a loss every play, it's only a 1 or 2 yard gain. You're getting West Claremont behind the sticks. And Winton Woods was able to kind of jump out to a lead. They went up 12-0 by the end of the third. They were up 6-0 at the end of the first. So they kind of had that lead to work with the whole game. And, then time of possession starts becoming an issue with West Claremont struggling to throw the football on Friday night. You get down 2 scores, then you can't lean on your run game as much when their running back was having a pretty good day, averaging 6 yards a carry. So if you're West Claremont, you were right there to beat Winton Woods, and that would have been a really big game for them to win for the standings. They're 4-3 in conference play right now, and 5-3 overall. So that would have been a really big win. But if you're Winton Woods, you're really happy to get out of there with, a win, considering that they really haven't played many. So they played Springfield pretty close, 16-6, Kings pretty close, 19-5. And then since then, they really haven't had a super close game. So I think that's really good for Winton Woods to get a nice challenge because they're going to Anderson this week. And this is for the conference. This is going to be for and Winton Woods also, I keep forgetting, they moved to D1 this year. So definitely a lot on the line seeding-wise when you're looking. I mean, everybody doesn't want to play Moeller. So you're going to try to do everything in your power to avoid playing them until the regional final. Mm-hmm. So I think this week's their biggest game of the season by far. And I mean, if you're Winton Woods, you're 8-0. You have a big game this week. You just got to prepare and get ready for it. But I mean, Anderson and Winton Woods is probably our game of the week, I would say. We've been looking at that and eyeing that game for about 4 weeks. So I would say if you're West Claremont, you just got to keep battling too. I mean, Winton Woods is a really good football team with a really, really good defense. I mean, their defense has only allowed 29 points in conference play and 35 points overall through 8 games. So only getting 7 on them isn't as bad as it seems like. You know, the offense probably didn't have as bad of a day. It's just Winton Woods has a really good defense. So
I mean, 7 points in the box score maybe doesn't look the most pretty, but that's probably an accomplishment. I mean, against that defense, right? That's something you can be like, maybe you lost, but you'd be like, hey, man, we played them pretty close.
And I mean, that defense has 3 shutouts through 8 games. So
I mean, we played them pretty close. I mean, even though our offense couldn't get going, you know, theirs didn't do like a ton either, right? So you know what? I mean, you might have lost, but hey, you can build a little confidence off that. And I think that it's almost like, you know, we've overlooked West Claremont enough. You know, they've had a solid year. It's a good year for them. So good. It's going to be exciting on Friday night. I'm looking forward to that one. And I'm sure we'll touch on it a little bit more in the conference stuff. I don't have anything else to add. Are you good to go on that game?
The last thing I'll add is, so if you're West Claremont's schedule the next 2 weeks are Loveland and Little Miami. So
favorable.
You know, Loveland's hasn't had a terrible year. They're middle of the pack in the ECC, and then Little Miami has really struggled this year at 1-7. So if you're West Claremont, there's still a path for you to finish the year, you know, 7-3, which is a very good season. You know, 6-3 in conference play, 7-3 overall. I mean, that's a really good year, and a year where Anderson and Winton Woods are both undefeated through 8 weeks.
2 of those losses are Winton Woods and Anderson. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, hey, you know what?
Yeah. Like sometimes you just run into a better team. So
for sure.
But yeah, so I can kick it back to you unless you have another thing to add.
I mean, like I said, you know, don't sleep on Loveland if you're don't sleep on Loveland if you're West Claremont, but you know, that's a favorable 2-game stretch to close out the year. So
yeah.
Good for the West Claremont Wolves. Glen SD and Amelia rise again from the ashes.
Through the
ashes. All right. So I'll throw it back to, Jacob already did, but I'll talk a little bit about some Kentucky football because it feels like it's been a little bit since we covered them. Dixie Heights and Connor had a pretty close game. I was looking for a good game to talk about in my second game tonight, and this one popped out to me. Connor won. Let me double check this. Yeah, 35-31 over Dixie Heights. I mean, both these teams. Connor, I'm pretty sure Connor's had a pretty good year. I think I'm not too privy on the Kentucky standings, but I know Dixie Heights has struggled at times, and so close game. Always good to see a close game, and in between 2 teams that we don't really necessarily cover very much. So I wanted to give them some love for a good game. It seems that Connor is we keep talking about these kind of teams because they keep popping up. They pound the rock, man. They had 301 yards rushing and only 45 yards passing. Like that's commitment to one aspect of your game. But you're really comfortable because your quarterback, his name is. Did they not tell me what his name is? Hold on a minute. Here, let me double check, make sure I want to get his name right. And then real quick for anyone checking, it took me 26 minutes this time to put the ticker up at the bottom of the screen. 45.
Miss that again too. I didn't help you out at all.
I know. I just didn't even see it. I was like looking at my screen and I'm like, oh boy. And probably should put that up there. Okay. I can't find his name. So I apologize. We'll just call you Hatfield tonight. Hatfield. Connor's quarterback, Hatfield. Not sure what his first name is, but we'll go with Hatfield. Very good with his legs, apparently, because he's the highest passing yards leader for Connor with 8 completions on 15 attempts, but he's also the highest rushing yards guy, 240 yards on 35 attempts.
Nice.
That's the quarterback. I mean, that's Lamar Jackson numbers.
Right. Yeah.
He's
Did you say 35 attempts?
35 attempts for 240 yards. And he
Yeah.
had, it doesn't tell me in the box score, but I believe he had 1, 2, 3, 4 rushing touchdowns.
Okay.
So 235.
Sounds like they got a little wing T action
Yeah,
going
I know.
there.
They've got something going on there at Connor.
Yeah.
They've got something cooking
Yeah.
down there in Kentucky. But I mean, overall, a really, really impressive stat line for Connor. And then Dixie Heights, that didn't have a bad night either. I mean, it was a 4-point game, right? They had Dixie Heights had 237 yards passing and also had 227 yards rushing. So a pretty balanced offense for Dixie Heights in this game. It's just Connor's got, I don't know what they've got going on, but it's something. I mean, you look also too at some of the other statistics here. First downs, Dixie Heights had more than Connor, but the turnover box is a little. Dixie Heights probably wishes they could have a few back. They had 3 turnovers. Connor had 0. So there's kind of where your, the bottom line is, right? I mean, 3 turnovers, you're -3 in the turnover battle. You lose a 4-point game and you outgain them in yards and in first downs. You're like, clean up some of those mistakes and you played a great game. Connor had 7 penalties compared to Dixie Heights 3. So, I mean, Dixie Heights is sitting at 2-5 at this point in the season. Connor 6-2. And it's just, I had to scroll down a little bit farther. I found the records. 2-5, close loss. It's a really hard loss to swallow, I think, if you're Dixie Heights, because you're at this point in your season where, a couple games under 500, not playing your best football. You've lost to some pretty good programs, and you've got Connor at home. And it just, when it seems like everything's going your way, Connor's got some sort of wing T voodoo magic going on with their quarterback. But even still, I mean, tough pill to swallow, 35-31 loss. But you know what? At this point in your season at 2-5, you can take, whatever, positives from that game and kind of, take that into the next week, right? Hey, you know what? We're 2-5. We had a good game against a good opponent. Let's take what we did that on last Friday night and take it to the next night, right? So, and to try to, you say you win your last 2 games of the season, you're 4-5. I mean, not great, not bad, right? I mean, I don't know how Kentucky's playoffs work compared to Ohio's.
Yeah,
but maybe if you have a better shot at getting the playoffs if you're 4-5 than 2-5. So there is something to build off of here for Dixie Heights, because like I said, I mean, they went almost even in terms of passing and rushing yards, 237 passing, 227 rushing. So overall, a good night, for the offense. When somebody's on fire like Mr. Hatfield is here for Connor, there's just not much you can do. And yeah, I mean, there's some positives to take away from this game for Dixie Heights, and then for Connor, I mean, heck, just keep letting Hatfield run.
Yeah, just get them some blockers and go.
Connor needs a guy with the last name McCoy, and then they're really in business. Hatfield McCoy in the backfield or something like that, right? So, but I mean, they keep rolling if you're Connor. I'll double check to see who they play next, because at 6-2, really solid season for the Cougars.
Yeah.
And it looks like they're 3-0, maybe they're 2-1 in conference play. They lost to Cooper. And Cooper's
a solid
really, really, really good this year. I mean, they've taken care of some teams they should have. Simon Kenton, Newport Catholic, lost to Ryle as well. So they've lost to 2 schools that they probably, should have. I mean, if we're looking at just records and statistics. Big game for them, though, this weekend on Friday night at home against Highlands. That should be a good game for Connor. Highlands a good program as well. And then they finish off their season at home. So 2 home games to end the season. They finish off their season at home against Boone County. So, you know, I'm excited for that game now too. Connor versus
Right.
Highlands. It should be a good game. I mean, both those are both pretty good schools, and some exciting stuff coming out of Kentucky that we don't talk
For
about
sure.
very much.
Yeah.
That's actually something I'll bring it up really quick before I kick it back to you
Mhm.
for the conference standings, because I don't want to take your thunder on the conference standings. I know
No, you're good.
that's your thing, but I think this is Cooper's best start to a season ever. I think in
Really?
program history. Yeah, they're what, 8-0, I think, at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, really, really good. So that's something worth noting down in Kentucky. Just because,
they're
when you think of
top
Kentucky,
5. They're actually at the 5th spot in the
top
list
25.
5, top 25
Yeah.
for week 9.
I mean, yeah, they're solid. They've had a great season. And when you think of Kentucky, at least from our perspective, you think of like Cub Cath, right?
Yeah.
But Cooper's rolling. I mean, they're pretty much
they're looking like the team. They're looking like the team to beat right now.
That's what I was. There's the words I was looking for, Jacob. You helped me out there. That was a pick me up. I appreciate it. And then I will throw it real quick just to talk about Dixie Heights really fast. So they have Scott this Friday night. That should be a good game. Scott's not great either. I think both schools are sitting at 2 and 5. But then unfortunately for Dixie Heights, they have Cooper and Ryle to end their season.
Oh, that's rough. Yeah.
So,
that's rough. Yeah.
But hey, you know what? You if they play like they did against Connor, maybe they can.
If you're Dixie Heights, you really have to look at that game and say, we had 3 turnovers. If we clean that up, why can't we win this game? Like, I think that's the message going into these next few weeks is like, you got to cut the mental mistakes out and, take care of the football. And you're putting yourself in a pretty good position to win if they do that. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. Unfortunately, they have to play Cooper and Ryle the last 2 weeks of the season. But like we just talked about, there's some positives you can take away from a loss like that. I mean, just clean up some mistakes and keep playing offense the way you're playing it. Hey, you can make some noise, and then hopefully Scott, Cooper, and Ryle don't have Houdini at quarterback running the football. All right, so we'll kick it through. Gosh, I'm losing it tonight, Jacob. I'll kick it back to Jacob. He's going to do his conference standings, his bread and butter.
Yep. So, let me get the screen shared, and then we'll get into this thing. So,
I'm not gonna find out that guy's name. He's just always gonna be Hatfield now.
Yeah,
that's just what he is to me now. He's Hatfield.
Okay, perfect. So, start out, since both of my games were in the ECC this week, we will start out here. So, as you can see, Anderson, Winton Woods reigning supreme for another week. Anderson's point differential keeps getting crazier and crazier. That's nothing new. But these teams match up this week. So biggest matchup of the year here. But, I mean, as you can see, what we were talking about with Kings and West Claremont both being really good teams this year, they're just not getting the love when you have 2 8-0 teams in your conference. Those are the teams that are going to steal all the attention and stuff. But both Kings and – oh, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. I just shout out to Lebanon, too. I mean, sitting there at 4-3, 5-3 of the season. Despite their point differential being in the negative, they've still got a winning record. That's an accomplishment.
For sure. And that's you got to wonder too. I'm sure the point differential being like that is just Anderson or one of those teams just stomping them really bad, and it's not really indicative of how they are for the season. So I think if all these middle of the road teams in the standings are really good, good football teams, it's not like Loveland's not that bad. Like, they're not a bad football team. They're pretty solid. And, we talked about Milford earlier. Milford probably would have had a better chance this year if they avoided some of those injuries. So this conference has been really fun to watch all year. They have it's top heavy, but there's also a lot of really good teams, throughout. So I'll look ahead. As I said, Anderson, Winton Woods, big one, but you got Turpin at Kings. Big game for Milford playing Little Miami. Hopefully they can get a win this week. And, Lebanon's playing Walnut Hills. So should be a win for Lebanon. And this Loveland West Claremont game should be pretty good too. So
a little game right there.
So you got a couple matchups this week that could be pretty good in the ECC.
I just don't see. I don't see any reason why Anderson Winton Woods isn't the game of the season. I think, up to this point, and
I will say the X Moeller game was pretty good too. So that's
I wish that Princeton and Moeller didn't play week 1. That's a great matchup. That's it sucks that it was week 1, but
we could very well get that in the playoffs. Though,
very true. So. Yeah, this is just regular season. I mean, but
that's it doesn't. You're going to get some matchups in the playoffs where these teams are going to square off for a second time in the year, and that's when things get really interesting. When you've already played a team once, you know what's coming, you know what they like to run and get to. How can you stop what they want to do? And that's going to be the really interesting thing. But so with that, I'm going to move on from the ECC and go on to the GCL South. And so you can see Moeller putting a beat down on St. Ives this year. So really good win for Moeller, just kind of sustaining their dominance. I mean, really, it's such a great thing they lost to a team that nobody knows anything about too. So really, their one loss, it's like I don't even really register it with me because I don't even know who Mallard Creek is. Mm-hmm. So they're having
Mallard Creek better put a plaque or a banner up somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, that's something we'll have to, look at is does Mallard Creek win their state championship?
Right.
But other than that, really tough loss for Elder this week to Riverdale Baptist from Maryland in overtime. So I'm just going to click on this box score a little bit, which is just brutal. Elder scored a TD and then just lost on the 2-point conversion at the end of it. That's
tough.
That's brutal. Yeah, losing on the last 2-point conversion. But if you're Elder, Caden Eastep, you got 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. Joey Thaman getting a touchdown on the board. So actually 3 touchdowns. Jeez, 10 receptions for 80 yards too. So really tough loss for Elder there. And then we touched on the St. X LaSalle game, but look at the schedule for week 9. So now St. Ives is coming back down and playing St. X. And then Elder's playing a school from Indianapolis. And then not really sure who Harvest Prep is.
Prep's from they're from I don't want to say Cleveland, but up north.
Okay.
They're an Ohio team.
And then for some Saturday football, if anybody's interested, at West Claremont too. How about that? That's Moeller's home game. Yeah. But, I know they never have, but
Lockland was like the de facto.
They move around. They do the mount sometimes, but so for people who are bored on their Saturday, maybe go take a look at the St. Ed's Moeller game because that's going to be a really good game, and that could honestly maybe even be a better game than Anderson Winton Woods this week. So. Really good week for the GCL South matchup wise, even though they're all non-conference matchups. And then week 10, you'll get LaSalle Elder, and then just other teams from all over the place, Virginia and Michigan. So
Christian Academy, that's an interesting one.
Yeah. So, and then with that being said, I'm going to move to the co-ed side of the GCL South. So you can see here, Baden picks up a huge win against Alter, 13-10, and then Chaminade Julienne smoking Carroll, 68-0. So, and then McNick staying at the top of the conference, beating Fenwick 35-7. So if you're McNick, you're coming into a really big week here because, let me look at the schedule if I remember. Yeah, so Chaminade Julienne and Baden are playing And so if you're McNick, you got Carroll, which if I believe, Carroll has struggled this year. They're a little bit better than Fenwick, but still have struggled in the conference. And then, Chaminade, Julian, and Baden are both, fighting for that top spot in the conference. So I think if you're McNick and you can get away, you're going to most likely get a win against Carroll, but you're almost rooting for CJ to beat Baden this week. That way, I think they play Baden week 10. So I think if they can if Baden gets a win, that's really good for McNick to maybe secure their first conference title here in a few. It's been a while for them. So, but that's about it for that. Not a ton of games there. So with that being said, I'm going to move on to the Cincinnati Hills League. And so as you can see, this is another conference where Wyoming and Indian Hill just sitting at the top. And if you're Indian Hill here, they pick up a 44-14 win over Finneytown, so good win for them. Taylor getting a nice win over Madeira, 36-12. Aaron McFarland's been a really good player for Taylor all year. Wyoming just doing Wyoming things, blowing teams out. It's kind of the usual, but then you do have a good matchup in here with some of the middle of the road teams. Reading and Deer Park produced a really good game last week, and even though Deer Park's 1-4 in the conference, they're 3-5 overall. So they've had a rough go of it in conference play this year, but I think there's a lot that they're a better team than maybe their record indicates. And then so with that, I'll look ahead to the schedule for this week. So huge matchup, Wyoming, Indian Hill this week. So week 9 is looking like it's producing the best matchups of the year between Moeller, St. Ed's, Wyoming, Indian Hill, and then Anderson, Winton Woods. So you're having a lot of teams battle the best of the best, whether it's in conference play or Moeller battling the best of the best in Ohio. So already looking through this, there's going to be a lot of games everyone needs to keep their eye on this week, especially when it comes down to seeding and stuff like that for playoffs. But moving on, going to the GMC, which was a pretty blowout heavy week in the GMC, which is why we didn't really touch on it much. After last week, we kind of talked about Coleraine, keep hanging tough and stuff. Like, could this be a big game where they can get some momentum again? Didn't happen against Mason. Mason came out and had a great game, 31-0. Good performance for them. Tell you one thing, Hamilton being 5-2 in the conference, 6-2 overall was not on my bingo card to start the season. And they've been playing phenomenal football. I think they really got a lot of momentum when they steamrolled Princeton a couple weeks ago. And, they're on a 5-game win streak. I don't think anybody really wants to play Hamilton right now. You see West and Princeton both put the smackdown on, and Lakota East. All three of those teams put the smackdown on Fairfield, Sycamore, and Oak Hills. So, really you got this 3-way tie going on with West, East, and I guess West is still ahead because of their overall record. And if they can just maintain and can win out their last couple of games, West should outright win the conference. But
we'll have the East-West game. I don't know if that's this weekend or next.
I would assume it is. It probably is because it's week 9. So we're going to have a million really good games going on. And then, Hamilton too. Hamilton could get lucky and, possibly, one of those maybe like a crazy NFL scenario when you get to week 17, 18, when it's like you need 3 or 4 teams ahead of you to lose and you to win and That could happen for Hamilton towards the end of the season to, share some of this, this division or this conference title. So Hamilton's got Coleraine, should be an easy win for them. Oak Hill's playing Fairfield, should be a solid game. But yes, East and West. So boom, another one. So that's up to 4. Really good games for this week. And then Princeton, Middletown. So should be a win for Princeton, and then Mason and Sycamore. But and then let me just look at week 10 too, because there's so much going on in this conference. West playing Mason. So I don't know if and then East at Oak Hills. So the interesting thing is really this West-East game is going to determine what's going to happen. If West wins, conference titles theirs, they'll get it, no problem, unless they lose to Mason the following week. If not, then it gets really interesting because everybody else should win the following week. So I don't know who's going to end up winning this between West and East, but this week's going to be a really big week in the GMC. And then moving on to the Cincinnati Metro Conference, Athletic Conference. As you can see, I'm sorry, West High. I hope something gets better for you guys. Taft winning 76-0. We talked about it, man. The West High just needs, their glory days are long gone. So I feel for them. But really good win for Taft. 6-2 on the year. Them and Cincinnati College Prep and Schroeder are overall kind of the best team so far. But Withrow's also 3-0. I think Withrow played a pretty tough schedule. Yeah, Elder, Alter, St. X, LaSalle. So they had some pretty tough out-of-conference games. So their overall record being 3-5, I don't think is their conference play is a little bit more indicative of who they are. But as you can kind of see, it's probably going to be Withrow that wins the red side of the conference, and then either College Prep or Schroeder, I guess. And then moving on, we're going to go to the Miami Valley Conference, where you see CHCA picked up a big win over Roger Bacon last week. That was one of the games we had to choose for our pick'ems. And so you can see big win for CHCA to kind of, I think they're running away with that Scarlet side of the conference, as long as they don't have any, big loss, some crazy loss down the stretch here. But playing Roger Bacon, let me check to make sure they don't play Purcell the last 2 weeks. Playing North College Hill, and then Summit Country Day. So if you're CHCA, you're looking at a pretty good season. Hopefully you can finish out conference play 5-0, 9-1 season. They look like they should run away with this Scarlet side. And then, you're in for a dogfight up top in the Gray Division with St. Bernard, Elmwood Place, and Cincinnati Country Day at both 3-0, 6-1 in each. So who's going to win between those two teams? We'll have to find out as the last couple of weeks.
Elmwood Place is a school that keeps popping up to me just because they're 7-1 and they've got a really good point differential. So
yeah,
for them.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, a lot of these schools you're getting into D3, D4, so definitely smaller schools. But if you're St. Bernard, Elmwood Place going into the playoffs with that resume, you got to feel pretty good. Matchup, regardless what your matchup is, that you can make some noise deep into these playoffs. So with that being said, I have 2 more conferences left, so we're almost there. Should be under an hour, but so we're going to the Southern Buckeye Athletic and Academic Conference. Batavia still just going strong, 38-0 over New Richmond, who New Richmond's a solid team. We talked about that. I mean, 5-3. They just last week they played who did New Richmond play last week? Didn't we talk about that one last week?
Yeah, we did. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but they played somebody
real quick. That was last week, my bad. Week 7, Batavia, Wilmington, New Richmond, West Brown. So they got the win against Western Brown. But yeah, big win for Batavia looking back at that week because they kind of squeaked by touchdown victory against Williamsburg. not Williamsburg, Wilmington, my apologies,
Mm-hmm.
who played them really tough and is only 4-4 record. But so for Batavia to kind of just get another dominant performance in, I think that has them feeling pretty good. And then, even for Wilmington too, Wilmington putting up 41 nothing, you got some pretty big blowouts this week. So not a ton for the SBAAC.
Week 9 delivers again, though, here, if you check the schedule really quick.
Yeah.
Batavia
Clinton, Massey is going to be good. And then let me check Bethel Tate, Williamsburg. And then Williamsburg, Bethel Tate, both those teams are 3-0 too. So, like we said, week 9 is, it's where all the good matchups come in, I guess. That's all the schedule makers were looking at that this year. So, and then finally, Southwest Ohio Conference, smallest conference we have, or tied for the smallest
South,
conference, GCL South. But Harrison continuing their dominance at 56-15 win, and then Mount Healthy 42-0 over Belmont, and then Northwest 36-0 against Dayton Ponitz. So, definitely a very, very good week for every team in the Southwest Ohio Conference. And then Harrison's got Bishop Watterson, which I don't know much about, but Harrison should be able to win against them. And then Northwest with Columbus DeSales and Talawanda at Mount Healthy. So if you're Talawanda, hoping for a bounce back week against Mount Healthy. But if you're Harrison, you're just hoping you can just keep riding this out, get to 9-1, and then get a really good playoff seeding and go from there, because they have a solid squad there. But so with all that being said, that is the end of this segment, and we are closing in on the end of the show. So the last things I will leave you guys with: Moeller, St. Ed's. What are all the games? We had like 5 games. Anderson, Winton Woods. Batavia, Clinton Massey, and then
Bethel Tate. Was it Bethel Tate Williamsburg?
Yes, Bethel Tate Williamsburg, East West.
Yeah.
And then I can't remember. Yeah, and Wyoming Indian Hills, the last one. So there's like 6 games, guys, that are all going to be really good games. So make sure you got your phones out, the tweet notifications on, and you are checking for live updates.
I really hope Payne and Greg didn't give us all those games in the pick'em.
Yeah, that'll be awful, dude. We might go like 3 for 10 this week.
Yeah, right. Right. That'd be like, you got to be kidding me. I can't pick all these games.
Yeah. Well, with all that, I think we are ready to get on out of here and let you guys enjoy the rest of your Monday night. We have a Bills-Jets matchup in the NFL tonight. So if anybody will be tuning into that, go enjoy that, and maybe some Peyton and Eli. But
I forgot about the Peyton and Eli stuff. All right, everybody. Well, hope you have a great evening. We'll be back again next Monday to talk about all the action from this week. We may go over 2 hours next week.
I hope not.
I'm kidding. All right, have a good night, everybody.
Yeah, enjoy.